Blessings. Tonight we have a question and answer session, so endeavour to answer the questions that have come in. So the first question tonight, Dear Luang Por, according to the Majjhima Nikaya, there are two conditions that give rise to right view: the voice of another and wise attention. Is my understanding correct to say that when a person has obtained right view, he has entered the stream? Thank you. Well, it's a very sort of central point to the practice of and development of the path in Buddhism towards the end of suffering, liberation from the round of rebirth. You say the voice of another, well, the voice of another who has right view, and generally the best people to have right view are noble ones. So hearing the Dhamma of the noble ones. If not the Buddha, then an enlightened noble one, at least somebody who's attained the first stage of the path would be good. Or at least someone who's well versed in the teachings and can explain them. And then wise attention, that's your own internal mental activity, how you treat the teachings that you hear. Bringing them in, paying attention to them with reasoned reflection or wise reflection, what we call yoniso manasikara. And these two things together combine to help us educate or learn, train this mind to know the truth and to observe experience as it is and understand relationships, cause and effect, and coming to see, well, what are the causes of stress and suffering or dukkha, the defilements, greed, anger, delusion, and all the mental states rooted in those three root causes. And then the path is the cultivating sila, samadhi, panya, the qualities and insights that you need to abandon greed, anger and delusion, getting that really established. In terms of right view, they talk about right view on two levels. There's the ordinary right view, or mundane level, which is what we all begin with. We hear the Dhamma, and if you can remember the Dhamma and you learn it and pay attention to it, as we've just heard, then it starts you thinking and practicing in a direction that's going to reduce the effects of the mental defilements on your mind and in your thinking and in your actions, and increase the qualities that the path is promoting, sila, samadhi, panya. But of course, in the beginning, we're relying on this external source of Dhamma, teachers, noble ones, and teachings from the Buddha and the noble ones. And in this period of time that we're absorbing it and practicing with it and coming to develop our own knowledge and experience, there's plenty of opportunity for wrong view or misunderstanding of the truth to slip into our thinking, our attitudes, because it's really deeply ingrained, our attachment to greed, anger and delusion, the mental defilements and the familiarity with them is so deeply ingrained that they'll keep popping up and interfering with this process of developing right view. So mundane right view or ordinary worldly right view can be mixed with a bit of wrong view, and they're sort of alternating. You hear the Dhamma, maybe you doubt the Dhamma, so you hear the Dhamma about teaching of the Four Noble Truths or karma, the value of making good karma by making merit, making offerings, the value of keeping precepts. We have doubt slip into our mind, whether it's worth it, whether it's worth the effort. Is it out of date? Is it really going to help me? Can I really do it? And so on. You have your own doubts, and then wrong views can slip in, or you meet the wrong person who's not a Kalyana Mitta, and they take you off in the wrong direction. So Sammaditthi is really, the center of Sammaditthi is your wisdom faculty, panya, or panyinsi, panya indriya, the spiritual faculty of wisdom. And until wisdom is clearly established, there's always a room for a bit of delusion to slip into your thinking. Like the guy who came to the monastery who got really ill and had said, I was previously a Buddhist and I followed the Buddha, and then I got ill and the Buddha didn't help me, so I've given up. This happens, doesn't it? We turn away from the Buddha Dhamma Sangha sometimes under the pressure of different things that arise in our life. But through the practice, cultivating the Noble Eightfold Path, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, then gradually the qualities of the path coalesce or converge on the mind and become established. And then there's a chance for this mundane right view to develop, evolve into super mundane right view, or transcendental wisdom of the path, Margapala, Nibbana. And super mundane Sammaditthi is, the mind is established in right view, and it's no longer just remembering the teachings, learning and remembering them, but actually witnessing and knowing the truths that the Buddha was pointing to. So as we just chanted in the Anatalakkhana Sutta tonight, the impermanence of these five khandhas, really knowing and witnessing that, seeing that, and the lack of self, the conditioned nature of body and mind. So that's the aim of the practice, and that's the result of the practice. But at what point the mind may be, say, the mind of an ordinary unenlightened worldling and the mind of an Arya, well, you have to look into that more deeply. To just sort of speculate like this, answer these questions, I'm not sure you can really apply that to any real life situation yet. You take the theoretical part of the teachings, that what we have in the text, the suttas and the Vinaya, and what you hear from the teachers, and then you have to apply it in your practice. But the Buddha gave these descriptions of, say, one who's entered the stream. Well, they don't fall back in their faith in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, the practice of sila, and the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path are developed well, but maybe not completed yet. If they're Sotapanna, they may still have some sensual desire arising, ill will arising, attachment to the physical body, and feeling is still there on some subtle levels. But the basic wrong view has been abandoned, the wrong view of the body and mind as self has been abandoned. So there's various criteria we can use to say whether, say, we individually have developed the path and fruit, or maybe hearing someone else's experience, we may be able to know to some extent, but in the end I think the Dhamma is pacitang, you've got to know for yourself. And you compare your experience and your understanding with what you've learned from the texts and then from your teachers, and just keep practicing. And as Ajahn Chah used to say, it's all uncertain, isn't it? You think you've entered the stream, and maybe you have, but maybe you haven't. It's not sure 100%. Next question, Lumpur. How do we cultivate forgiveness for someone who has hurt us repeatedly for so long, so many times? Well, it sounds like it might be quite a challenge and task, so you would probably need to take a lot of patient effort and understanding that when we hold on to anger for someone, even when they've hurt us repeatedly, that anger is our own mental defilement, which is triggered or arising in reaction to the pain and the suffering this other person is sending our way. But it's our own thought and emotion. And as you practice forgiveness, you're developing insight into the impermanent nature of anger and how it arises and ceases in your mind. And also seeing that as long as you hold on and identify with the anger for that person, you're going to still be suffering. So there's a few different things here, aren't there? One is the behavior of another person. Ultimately, they've got to be responsible for that. They'll have to receive the fruits of their karma if they have been doing unskillful things, hurting people through words and actions. That karma will come back on them. They've got to deal with that. For you, as you establish mindfulness and you separate out the different factors in this experience of being angry and unable to forgive someone, say, you have to reflect that as long as you dwell on their faults and what they've done with anger, you're suffering. You have to see that and try and develop that insight to the point where you're willing to set aside your anguish so that you can move on. So you acknowledge what's happened, but you move on, let go of the anger. And you have to also overcome the doubt that comes up that says, by me forgiving them and letting go of my anger, am I being weak? Am I letting them get away with it, kind of thing? So you have to keep focus back on your own heart, your own mind, and say, well, as long as I hold on to my anger, I'm going to keep suffering. And maybe that person has walked out of your life or there's no further connection, but you can still remember them with anger and keep suffering over and over again. Really, you're learning to live with that memory skillfully, so it may still return and come up in your thinking, in your mind, but you're cultivating the right view and right thought towards the memories of the pain, the unpleasant experience. So you have to accept you can't just squash out memories and deny or suppress, but you can learn to live with those memories peacefully so that they no longer trigger suffering in the present when they come up. And you have to keep working at it, and depending on the depth of the anger and the attachment, how much importance you've previously given that in your mind, that might determine how long it will take to let go, to move on. Sometimes quicker, sometimes very slow. But if you want to purify your mind from anger and experience freedom from suffering, well, you really have no choice. And you just have to be very patient and work through it. And of course, if you cultivate kindness and compassion, well, that may speed up the process and ease the process of forgiveness, letting go of anger and hatred. One of those reflections we always give is, if you reflect on the impermanence of your life, the impermanence of that person's life, if it's someone you're angry with, and the impermanence of your own life, and you think, do I want to ruin the rest of my life by holding on to this anger? Or if I was to die today, tonight, with all this anger in my heart, how would that be? Would you be content just to die full of anger? Or is it better to let it go? Forgive them, move on before you die, get that sorted so that it's no longer lingering in the mind. This is why I say someone's on their deathbed, we often encourage the family and friends to go and ask forgiveness from them, so you clear up this kind of lingering anguish and forgive each other so that at the end of your life you can die peacefully. Next question. Ajahn, I am confused that when some people who are very selfish, angry and greedy, yet they seem to have a lot of good merits and become very wealthy, it is hard to imagine that those people did a lot of good things in their past lifetimes to gain the merits for this life. If their personality traits are this unskillful. Well, everything's uncertain, anicca. Karma, the results of karma, people's actions and the results of their actions. And there's a mixture, isn't there? People have done good and bad in the past, just as we have. If you think back in your life, there'll be, if you center your mind in mindfulness and then you reflect back with wise attention, yoniso manasikara, you might be able to remember many, many different actions and incidents and things that you've said and done, and then just your views and thoughts on things in the past, and you'll notice there's times when you lost it, you were angry, and there's times when you were probably kind and compassionate. There were times when you helped people, and then times when you were very selfish, perhaps. We've all got a mixture of that. But as we go through life, the different situations we encounter, partly we've got our own internal karma coming up, our own reactions to things and our own attachments to deal with. And then the external situations coming up trigger and prompt different things. So you see it, sometimes people start off very idealistic and they work hard and they do different things in their life and achieve a certain amount of success, maybe earn money or gain power, fame, fortune. And then these things can corrupt, can't they? So their more pure motivation, the good intention starts to fade, and the desires and attachments to the fame, fortune and wealth take over. Maybe fears of losing fame, fortune and wealth take over. So when people are afraid, they often act in more immoral or antisocial ways or more selfish ways. Or the attachment, the greed can come up strongly, and then through competitiveness they want more. And so people can change, and they've done enough to be successful on one level in their life, but then some of the mental defilements evolve and become stronger and more damaging. But perhaps the final result of acting with greed, anger and delusion in a situation, say, of great wealth, power, influence, and then the defilements take over, perhaps the results of that don't manifest until a future life. And in this life, maybe the person seems to be successful, and you know or you suspect they're doing all kinds of corrupt, immoral, bad things, but you can't touch them. Because they're so rich and powerful, you feel like there's nothing can be done, there's no justice in life, it's not fair. But karma is karma, it will catch up with them eventually. But whether it's this life or the future, we don't know. That's not for us to say, maybe. No point speculating on the other people, really. More importantly is come back and look at yourself. Look at the kind of karma you're making. Are you attaching to your success and good fortune? Is it leading you to become more selfish or fearful or act in more unwholesome, unskillful ways? The practice tends to be the Buddha way the Buddha taught is, encourage you to come back and look at yourself. If you see something unwholesome, unskillful in another person, you come back and ask yourself, do I have that? Do I have greed? Do I have anger? How is it affecting me? How pure is my mind? Could that be me? If we are only modestly successful, modestly wealthy and influential in our life, okay, maybe our defilements are not stimulated very much. But suddenly things take off, maybe we suddenly earn a lot more money than we used to, or we know people that we didn't know before, and those people are very influential and can help us, and we get on, and life changes for the better, maybe, on the material level. But then that can stimulate so much greed, our mind changes and we stray from our practice of precepts or generosity, and we become different people. And you see this all the time, people who maybe start from fairly humble origins, they grow up in their life, and as they become more powerful, they can take advantage of that. And some people can maintain their good qualities and use their position to help others and do good, but some don't. They get caught up in the greed of the moment. There's all this opportunity to amass more wealth and more power and do more, so then that takes over their mind and they slip away from the Dhamma, and they're more following defilements. And they say, what do they say? When you get to the top of the bread pile, you get top of the line, your mind can go in two ways. You can either be full of compassion for all those further down because you've moved up the line, up the hierarchy of life, and you become successful, wealthy, powerful, but you're full of compassion for those who aren't yet because you've been there and you understand them. So you want to help people and use that position to help them. But other people don't do that. They get to the top of the pile and they become even more selfish, and they see everyone as competition and as an enemy, and they have to push them down and keep reinforcing their position and competing with others. And they say, well, I've been waiting for a long time to get my crack at the honeypot, and now I'm going to go for it. And they really don't care about other people because they've been waiting so long for their chance. And people can go in two directions, can't they? Some just end up more greedy than before, more angry, more selfish than before, and exploit others. And nobody is immune for this. We've all got defilements, and even the Buddha warned monks. He said, as you become more senior, you can knowingly or unknowingly take advantage of people's faith. Say, people offer you things or make an invitation, and you just say, "Oh, I want this, 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 this." But are you saying that out of a real need as a monk? How much do you really need? Or are you just exploiting that situation to take advantage of the laity? This is something the Buddha reminded monks about all the time, not to exploit the good faith of the lay people, to be modest, to be among a few wishes, to be frugal, to be careful in the way you use your requisites, and so on. This is what determines someone whether they're practicing the Dhamma or not. Are they increasing their greed? Are they becoming careless? Or are they managing and reducing their greed? Whether it's a monk or a politician or somebody who's successful in life, these are the sort of things, if you're practicing the Buddhist path, practicing the Dhamma, these are the sort of reflections you have to keep making. As I said, one of the dangers of getting to the top of the pile or getting into a leadership position is that you feel that, I've made it, now I can do whatever I want. I'm above the law, it doesn't matter, I've got the power, no one can touch me, I'll just do what I want. And that way of thinking does come up, unfortunately, all the time. But karma gets us all in the end, so don't be heedless. If you act in selfish, greedy ways, you manipulate or exploit others, it will come back on you. But how quick, how slow, it depends on many factors, I think. Another question. Is keeping good sila the most important practice rather than cultivating other paramitas? Since some Kruba Ajahns really seem to emphasize it a lot. Well, sila means moral integrity, ethical action, And it's considered to be an essential foundation for the practice. So it's always emphasized over and over again. Because you've got to have strong foundations in order to progress. Otherwise your practice can crumble. So like we're just talking about with, say, the idea that somebody becomes very successful, wealthy, famous, powerful, influential. If they don't maintain their sila, then everything can crumble and they can fall into disaster or abuse their position and do a lot of harm from their position and get lost, lose their way. So in the practice of Dhamma, the Buddha always said, you practice satipatthana, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but it's essential that you practice the sila together. It's purified by sila. Otherwise it's ineffective. So if you go on a meditation retreat, a vipassana retreat, and you learn how to, different techniques of meditation, whether it's mindfulness of breathing or developing insight into the 3 universal characteristics, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. You may learn a lot of techniques and learn some of the basic meditations, and you can do them to a point. But if you don't match that with practicing sila and cultivating sila, making the sila strong, it's like you'll never quite get beyond the hindrances of the mind, and your meditation will never develop because sila is not yet established. And sometimes people overlook this or misunderstand this point, and so they, like in Thailand, they go on their vipassana retreat for a week and then they go and spend another month on the beach doing all kinds of things. And then they say, oh, I did my vipassana retreat, why isn't life improving? And maybe there's other things, other factors there. They're maybe not keeping the precepts very well. It's just, I would have thought common sense, but obviously we have our karmic conditioning, so sometimes it's hard to establish morality, but if you really want to understand the Dhamma, you need it, because with morality you gain stability of mind, clarity of mind. What do you get from, say, the 5 precepts? Well, you get the quality of metta if you don't kill or harm others. You get the quality of contentment if you're not seeking to steal or take other people's property. If you keep the 3rd precept, you get the quality of honesty in your relationships. The 4th precept, you get, again, honesty and love of truth if you don't lie. And the 5th precept, you get sobriety and clarity of mind as a result of keeping the 5th precept. All these qualities are essential for meditation and developing calm and insight, samatha and vipassana meditation. So teachers will keep coming back to reinforce them, to help remind people of the value and the importance of sila in the path. Because until the mind is established in it, then one can slip away from sila or forget it, or be in moments of heedlessness, do the wrong thing. And sometimes people break the sila and it can have lifetime consequences. So you get drunk once and you may end up in an argument, or go and break all the other precepts one by one, or do something really extreme, like drive a car and crash it and hurt yourself or hurt other people, all kinds of things. Or you break the law and steal something and get put in prison or something. Some of the precepts in some situations will have lifetime and life-changing consequences. Whereas if you keep them, they're constantly supporting the practice of mindfulness and insight. And it just naturally supports the practice of satipatthana, the development of the factors of enlightenment, and so on. So it's just an essential part of the practice that we have to keep coming back to. And we don't always like it, because often our defilements want to break the precepts. So there's a certain little dispute or argument going on in the mind, but try to see the value of it. And as far as paramitas go, the 10 paramis, well, they're all equally important. It's not like one is more important than the other. They all work together to produce an enlightened mind. But sila is something that generally in society you're not always encouraged to keep. Often society, people around us are not keeping precepts and not practicing sila in a way that would support the development of the Dhamma, insight into the Dhamma. So we're under pressure. So that's why teachers will keep coming back to it, because there's a lot of pressure from outside not to keep precepts or not to value sila. But the other paramis are also important. All of them are essential for the practice. Dear Luang Por, today I had an interesting experience for the first time during meditation. As soon as I sat down, the mind gathered and became aware of the feeling of worry arising, and after it ceased, anger arose, and after anger ceased, the feeling of worry arose again. Throughout this awareness of those feelings, there was a sense of piti ongoing from start to end. Is this experience a natural phenomenon when the feelings and the mind are seen as separate entities? Well, piti, as we know, is joy, rapture. It's one of the factors of samadhi. So if you're meditating and you're aware that it's arising, and piti arises in many different ways, physical and mental, but generally it's joy. It's a very buoyant quality of mind. You're interested or even enjoying your meditation. Even if you have some pain in your body or you have unpleasant thoughts, memories pop up, if the piti is sustained, that's a sign there's a level of calm there. If piti is really strong, physical sensations disappear, the sense of the body disappears, the mind is very bright, rapturous. But sometimes piti is more mild, sometimes it comes and goes. But if it's there all the time, that's generally a sign that your mind is in a more wholesome state. You're probably more mindful of your meditation object than usual. There's probably other factors of samadhi present. Like you're putting attention on your object, keeping it there, piti arises. But if you're not in full one-pointedness, well, still thoughts and memories can arise, mental formations can arise. So, in between experiencing piti and maybe some sukha, thoughts come into the mind, and some of them maybe are unwholesome. Memories or unwholesome mental states are prompted just from past karma. They pop up into the mind. Issues and things that you're attached to will come into the mind, but because you are already in your meditation, you're mindful, you're relatively calm, you may have enough awareness to see them, but in a detached way, so you let them go. So rather than taking them up and becoming worried or angry, you're able to see them in a more objective way with mindfulness. Oh, there is anger, there's worry, but there's that sense of separation. They arise, but you're not feeding them, holding on to them, so then they tend to subside and pass away quite quickly. And you can have a very good insight into the impermanent nature of mental states. And it's rather than it being me, mine, my anger, I am angry, it's more there is anger arising, but then it's passing away because you're detached from it now. And this is, the miracle of mindfulness. It gives you detached awareness of your own experience of body and mental states and feelings and memories, the whole lot. You're seen in more detached, objective way. So that gives you a chance to develop insight into impermanence, the unsatisfactory nature of them, and the selfless, conditioned nature of experience. Even pleasant mind states, not just the unpleasant, but pleasant mind states, pleasant feelings, pleasant memories, wholesome thoughts, you can see as impermanent, as not self. And that gives you an insight into what we usually take as pleasurable and happiness. All the things we associate with pleasure and happiness in life, they certainly can stimulate pleasant feelings and responses and put us in a good mood. But as you become more mindful and you're sustaining that mindfulness, then you can reflect, these are still impermanent. What's impermanent is not self. So you're practicing gaining insight into the impermanent nature of the 5 khandhas as you do this. It seems like you've had a bit of that experience, which is good. And one thing you'll notice, as insight develops and becomes clearer and stronger, more piti and sukha may arise from that. Piti and sukha arises as you put your mindfulness on an object, such as the breath, and you're letting go of hindrances and distractions. But then as you contemplate, develop insight, say, into impermanence of your experience, if there's strong insight, that also gives rise to piti, and as piti and sukha may get stronger as the mind lets go of wrong views, taking things as permanent, as self. As the mind sees the impermanence, lets go, it's more detached, more piti and sukha can arise. So I think in short I would say this is a good sign if you're experiencing piti and observing the arising, ceasing of feelings, of mental states. Just keep it up and be very patient with it. Practice is practice, it's work, it's effort, it's patient effort, and the aim is to maintain the mindfulness so you know what's going on in your body and your mind, but you're not always reacting with self and creating a self out of it. You're just knowing in this detached, mindful way. There's more and more. And this is, say, one of Ajahn Chah's key points to his teaching, is you just keep your mind in a normal state, whatever's coming up. It's pleasant, it's unpleasant, it's refined states of samadhi, it's very coarse, negative emotions, greed, anger, delusion, worry, fear, whatever. Try to keep your mind in a state of normality, mindful and aware, and not attaching. So those are the questions for tonight. We'll end the session there and wish you well with your practice.